Good afternoon. Welcome back to another edition of NCIA's Industry Essentials Educational Webinars. For those tuning in for the first time, NCIA's Industry Essentials Educational Webinars is NCIA's premier digital educational platform featuring a variety of interactive programs, all designed to provide you timely, engaging, and essential education when and where you need it most. I'm Brian Gilbert, the host of our Industry Essentials webinars and the Deputy Director of Events here at NCIA, and I'm very thrilled to be back in action and kicking off the first of our two Catalyst conversations being presented in honor of Black History Month today, as well as the first live webinar being broadcast in 2023. So, do you find yourself going through the licensing or permitting process, trying to figure out how to launch your business model in a municipality that isn't set up for it yet? Or are you operating already and looking for insights as to how to keep your license or strengthen your business model? Well, if so, you're in luck, as today we'll be presenting a dynamic and practical conversation with members of NCIA's retail committee alongside cannabis industry leaders based in Chicago, speaking to the importance of business collaborating with community members and how to create mutually beneficial partnerships between communities and businesses through community benefit agreements. As always, this special Catalyst Conversation series is designed to give enrollees in our Equity Scholarship Program the opportunity to network and gain access to valuable knowledge that will help them excel in the cannabis industry. But don't forget, this is an interactive educational experience. So make sure to post your feedback in the chat room, like so many of you have already done, your questions to the live public Q&A board, and respond to any live polls which pop up throughout the program, another of which should be incoming soon. All right, well, enough with the intro. Let's get this show on the road. To kick off our conversation, I'd like to welcome our moderator for today's program, Mike Lamuto, NCIA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Manager. Great to see you here once again, Mike, especially so soon after catching up in person at our recent Northern California Cannabis Industry Social. I know you've been spearheading a lot of great initiatives, working groups, and programs here at NCIA since we last met for this Catalyst Conversation series, I believe at the end of November. So I'm really excited to see what you have in store for us during today's conversation.
Awesome.
And if before I turn over to Mike, if you haven't already checked out Mike on our new and revamped cannabis industry or cannabis minority report that is broadcast weekly on Mondays, please do make sure to go to our NCIA feed and follow our page, as he's been able to produce some really amazing programs recently. And I'm sure he's going to be touching on some of the amazing conversations he's been having on that platform as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mike, and you can take it away from here.
Awesome. No, thanks, Brian. Thanks for the plug for the Cannabis Minority Report podcast. It's been a great experience getting season 4 actually rolling now. So it's been awesome. But I'm really excited for today's conversation. This is a very important conversation. We hear all the time people complaining and talking about or using it as an excuse that their bottom line, it matters, and that's why they can't do things that are equitable or can't do things that have impact, right? Well, we also know that there's a lot of businesses out there, such as B corporations, benefit corporations, like Ben and Jerry's, I believe, is one of those that does great business and does a great job of doing well and doing good, right? Today in the cannabis industry, we're going to talk about a company and a community benefits agreement specifically in Chicago that is showing that you can actually do really well and really good both at the same time, and that they're actually not mutually exclusive, that they actually feed and enhance each other. We have a great conversation lined up today to basically talk about how you can crack the code and how you can also pressure others to crack the code to make sure that we do good and do well. As the whole point in cannabis is we get to create a whole new paradigm, a whole new industry, so to speak. And so that's what we're really doing here today, what we're talking about here today. We have a great lineup here, great panelists. I got to see Doug and Gary at a conference last year talking about this specific topic. And that blew my mind. And I was like, okay, wait, we have to figure out how to do something with you guys. And I introduced them to our retail committee here at the NCIA. And that's why we're here now. That we hope this is the first of many conversations with Doug and Gary and our retail committee here. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce everybody and then let them introduce themselves. Doug Kelly from Chicago is Cannabis Equity Illinois Coalition, is an amazing organization doing great work on the ground for the last several years. That's how I got to meet Doug and also Peter, the two of them doing a lot of great work there. Gary Little, the and I'm blanking on your title here, but the director of retail operations at Nature's Care in Chicago. I believe you're out in the West Loop, and again, doing really great work. I heard so many great things about you before we even got to meet in person in the first place. And then it's been awesome to get to know you since then. And then Shannon Vetto, the vice chair of our retail committee, coming in from Washington, the CEO of the Evergreen Market up there, as well as Ace Castillo, brand new to the retail committee, but not new to the industry. The CEO of Banyan Tree, newly licensed after a several-year battle to get that license in Fresno, California. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to you all to, if you could introduce yourselves real briefly. And really, I think the real question that I want to ask you here to get things started is why this is an important conversation to you in the first place, and then we'll jump right into the conversation. So let's go ahead and start with Doug over here in Chicago.
Good morning. Thank you, Mike, and thank everybody for joining today. My name is Douglas Kelly. I'm the Executive Director of Cannabis Equity Illinois Coalition, and we're fighting for equity, justice, and inclusion in the cannabis industry for Black and Brown people. I'm also on the board of IMCBO, which is a trade association, just looking to provide technical assistance to everybody who's in the industry there. And I'll pass it over to Gary.
Thanks, Doug, and thanks, Mike. My name is Gary Little. I am the Director of Retail Operations for Nature's Care, which is a subsidiary of Acreage Holdings. And I'm also the CEO and partner for Cola Group, which is Acreage Holdings' social equity partner in the state of Illinois. And really, our focus is try to bring, like Doug has already said, equity and inclusion to the marketplace in cannabis.
Shannon, how about you?
Hi, thanks, Gary and Mike. My name is Shannon Vetto. I'm the CEO of Evergreen Market. I've been in the industry since 2015. My background's on the capital markets and finance side, but I've been in retail now for about 5 years. We're hopefully getting into California as well. But this conversation is important to me because I think we all need to be in the conversation. We need to be advocates. And we need to catalyze our business with all communities. And this conversation and the community benefits agreement seem to be doing some of that.
Awesome. I love how you work the word catalyze into your introduction there too. That's awesome. Ace, what do you got here for us? What brings you here today?
Hi, thanks, Mike. My journey in the cannabis started 15 years ago as a legacy operator, and now I'm now CEO and founder of Banyan Tree. And Banyan Tree was built upon the idea of providing joyness and wellness to my community through cannabis. And so I'm here today to make sure that my organization does have an impact when it comes to community benefits. And I'm just glad to be here and learn from all these great people. So
awesome. Appreciate all you being here today. And so to get things started, I think one of the things that I really wanted to touch base on is just make sure everybody understands and is aware of the context that we're talking about in the first place, right? And so, these community benefit agreements, a lot of applications do include, a social impact plan or a community plan or something along those lines. They're usually pretty paltry, to be quite frank. They're usually one of the smallest parts of an application. You may have a 100-page application or whatever it may be, and there's like a paragraph about the community engagement aspect. It doesn't usually get vetted and so on and so forth. So that's really the context that we're talking about here, because we're talking about cannabis businesses that often are very great members of the community, but at the same time, don't necessarily have the structure other than kind of the things that are just trying to throw at a wall. What I really appreciate about the context here is that you guys are in Illinois where there's been a lot of complaints about the equitable rollout and how things have happened in Illinois. And you guys took the initiative there, Gary, Doug, to say, hey, we're going to go ahead and make something actually impactful. And it's not just going to be because the state has said we have to do it. It's going to be because this is going to be good business. So Gary, could you give us some context of, kind of what kickstarted this for you and how you got to even know Doug in the first place?
Certainly, Mike. Thanks for the lead in. Yeah, so when Cola Group was selected as Nature's Care's social equity partner, I did a lot of events where I went around and listened to basically community meetings where they were talking about equity, right? And one group always stood up at every single meeting I went to, and it was CEIC, Cannabis Equity Illinois Coalition. Peter specifically was always asking, hey, are you guys being some of the multi-state operators who were holding these events as they were trying to open up facilities in the city, are you guys willing to sign a community benefits agreement? And every single one of them said no. Lo and behold, they came around to Acreage, who I was partnered with at the time, and asked Acreage Holdings the same questions. Acreage Holdings spun around and said, hey, Gary, will you read this community benefits agreements? I'm like, sure. So I read it for them, and I'm like, hey, by the way, you asked me to put together a diversity and inclusion plan for you. This is like 95% of what they're asking for. And like, they said to me, like, what are your thoughts? I'm like, I think you should sign it. And so they did sign it. And ironically, it's a historic agreement for us because it's the first of its kind in the state of Illinois. It's the first of its kind in the country. And it's the first of its kind in cannabis, right? And so that's how I met Douglas Kelly and the Cannabis Equity Illinois Coalition. I think the thing that's most important about that event is that it just wasn't being papered, as you mentioned, Mike. It had to have teeth in it. And one of the things Acreage told me was like, hey, you need to deliver on all these things that, you know, we have in here. It can't just be wordsmithing, so to speak. So that's kind of how the relationship was and how it developed.
Awesome. And Gary, Doug, from your perspective, you know, how did you guys, I mean, you had before you even had that 95% in alignment, you had to do some work just to get to that point where you had a community benefits agreement that you knew would have teeth. How did you guys go through that process to get to that point?
So it all started out like everything that my organization do comes from the community. So they lead our conversation in directions we're going. And then community benefits came up and everybody was like, we think this would be a great idea. Let's see if we can get some of these multi-state operators to sign on to a community benefits agreement. And like Gary said, we showed up at every one of those meetings asking for it. And then we get the call from Gary, and our lawyer at the time was Achille Parnell, and he helped structure it. And we just laid it all down on the line, and pretty much within 2 weeks, we had the agreement done. But it was just the point of like, there is no teeth to those agreements that they put in for community engagement. And we wanted to do something really different. And just to make sure we can lead by example. And, you know, Gary has knocked every last one of those out of the box already, so.
Excellent. Yeah, I think the thing that stands out to me here is one, it was a collaborative effort, and it was a lot of listening and a lot of talking to the community itself, actually. Go figure, right? Get out into the community to figure out what the community wants, right? And then the other part is, as I mentioned, the collaborative piece is that you all are working together. You know, you mentioned Achille Parnell and others, I'm sure, were part of the process. Peter, who isn't here today, of course, is part of this process. So, you know, Gary, what are the components of the community benefit agreement that you're knocking out of the park there in Chicago?
Sure. So one of the things that was really important was to making sure that it was going to help the community, right? So hiring to make sure folks had a living wage. Now, remember, this is back in 2020, right? And I got to give it to the CEIC for making sure that, you know, people were getting $15 an hour, and they were. So that was kind of a huge benefit for us. Being able to make sure that folks who started in dispensary had a career path, right? As simple as that may sound, you start off as a dispensary associate or a bud tender. How do you get to become the store manager? How do you get to become the director of retail operations? How does that happen? How does that path happen? So we outlined that. And the interesting thing that Acreage did, I think, that is notable is instead of, you know, typically people get a raise every 365 days, but this was skill-based. So as you increased your skills, you got more money, right? So that was also something that was hugely beneficial. Supply chain. We made a commitment to make sure our supply chain was supplied by people of color who were starting off in the industry who couldn't break in, right? So Doug and I, we still meet every week and we talk about different vendors and people that need opportunity to get into space. Those are some other measures that we met as well. Job fairs, expungement, all these things are things that we did on a regular basis in coordination with the CEIC to make sure that we could get really, really good talent inside the dispensary, right? And give people an opportunity who otherwise would be passed up. A great example would be, you know, I've worked with Doug and the CEIC. I personally went through about 600 some applications and hired people, you know, as as we all would say in this venue, had a little hair on their background, right? But we helped them through that process and helped them become, folks that had good opportunities inside the space. So those are, I think, the things that people don't really see that are very beneficial. What are the measures? What does that mean in the bottom line? Because that's what everyone wants to know, right? Well, I'll tell you what it means. 40% of the folks who work for us have gotten a pay raise of about 14% or higher. 36% of the people who work with us basically have risen through the organization, myself included, right? So 80%, we have an 80% customer retention rate, right? We're 15 points higher than we were year over year last year. So if you want to know what measurable numbers are, I just gave them to you, and it's increasing, right? So we're doing all the right things to really kind of help the organization do well on its bottom line and also benefit the community at the same time.
That's beautiful. Again, those are metrics. Those are real numbers that we're using to measure. The thing that I also want to highlight here again is you kind of slipped this in there, but you personally went over about 600 to 700 applications in the hiring process. And that's what in turn has led, I believe, in a lot of ways to, like you said, making sure that folks that, maybe didn't fit the box exactly well were able to be in the right seats. And then as a result, I mean, you're talking 30-40% rate of people getting their raises pretty quickly, as well as moving on and moving forward in the company. So moving upwards in the company, a lot of upward mobility and creating structure for it. So that's awesome. So yeah, it's really amazing stuff. And, that brings us to the contrast of, looking at a state like Washington State, which, in 2015 or so, I think it was, you guys came online, and there was really, I mean, it was just, in Illinois, I would say the advantage, although it's a disadvantage in a lot of ways, but the advantage is seeing how poorly other states have kind of rolled things out, Colorado being one of them, of course, we know, and Illinois itself also. So we kind of were able to see folks like, when Gary here needed that support, it was like, bam, Doug is right there, Peter's right there, Akile's right there. People are there to actually provide that other collaborative support, which often helps with being able to go to the higher ups and say, this is what we need to do. In Washington State, it was so disorganized at the beginning, right? Because it was the first state along with Colorado to do this. And so, Shannon, you kind of gone through that experience, and something that came up in our conversations in preparing for this was just how important it is to get ahead of things, get in the early part of the conversation. What are the challenges that you're now seeing as far as having not had these kinds of conversations and having not being able to do this at the beginning? Because I know this is something that's important to you, and how do you figure out how to integrate that now? Because a lot of folks that may be listening to this, maybe they're not new. They're trying to figure out, how do I go ahead and add this? Or maybe they are new and they're figuring out, oh, I got to do it now. So anyway, I know I just said a lot, but the question really for you is, the importance of getting ahead early and what that has meant for you to not be able to do that.
Well, I think that I'm lucky enough to work for an organization that actually values all those things that Gary talked about that are in the community benefit agreements. I've just, recently have a terminology that I can refer to say these are the right things. And it's not only for the community, it is for your company. The bottom line is supported over and over again with a degree of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I also think one of the things I've seen is that this industry, having been there early, this industry has been taken over a little bit by Wall Street. And Wall Street is where it came from. And there's very limited diversity in Wall Street. And so having to address that in my previous life, I've been sort of addressing that internally. And I think the people that are going to win are the people that are integrating the community, the legacy community, in addition to the community that we are serving and the communities we operate in. So 75% of my corporate team has been promoted from within. Every single one of that 75% started as a bud tender in our stores. My director of marketing and product was in the legacy market, and now she's running. We do 40 million top line. So she buys for that, and she has buyers working for her now. She's had every job in our company. And then I also have my technology team and my data team who understand our customers. So, I'd love to know that we have a little bit of both. I come definitely from a corporate background, so we need a little bit of the corporate process, but we need to figure out how to value and understand the community that cannabis truly is. And I think that's the challenge is it has to be well integrated. We call it our hybrid culture. We need a little bit of both, but we also have to appreciate both sides. And we did an internship this summer with an individual from New York who is working on the social equity programming and trying to build an infrastructure for that community to start. I just think there's those kind of things, and I'm really feeling lucky to participate with this particular group of panelists who can help us as a state think about it a little bit differently, where we're 10 years in. This is the 10th year. 2012 was the year Washington passed this legislation, and we are not in the foreground or the forefront of diversity at all in our industry, and we need to figure out how to get there.
No, I appreciate those insights. And the individual you mentioned, Neville Lewison from New York, came through our social equity scholarship program here at NCIA. Is really, I mean, one of the most brilliant minds that I've met in this industry, and what he's trying to do and bring to the kind of the retail space, basically. But to your point that you're making here, is I think that the thing that really stands out to me is that it's not so complicated, right? Like you're talking about, the folks that you hired are now the folks that have been promoted. Gary's talking about the folks that are hired, the folks that are being promoted. And if your hiring policies are more equitable, such as hiring legacy folks, hiring folks with a little bit of a so-called checkered background. I don't know, I love that term, but everybody knows what I mean. But the fact is that if we do this and make that conscious effort, that is community benefit, right? Sometimes this community benefit side of things, it's so big and it's so nebulous that people just say, I don't even know how to deal with that. So I love that you guys are talking about specific brass tacks, making sure you're hiring policies, you're more involved in them, you actually put intention into them, and then you see the results, and the results seem to be pretty immediate, honestly, and then also long-term. Ace, on this note, you're a new licensee. And there's two things that really I think that stood out to me as we've been preparing for this is, one is you had some ideas about the legacy folks, right? Because the legacy folks are, especially in a place like California and also states like New York and a lot of other states also as well, the legacy folks have been, let's be real, they're propping the industry up, keeping the industry going throughout prohibition for decades, right? And so now we're in this place where they are, legacy folks are integrated in entwined in the community, and we're standing up an industry that's leaving a lot of these folks behind. So you had the thought of how do we include them? So I'd love to get your take on that. How do we, what are some thoughts you had as far as the community benefit agreement and how that relates to the legacy industry?
Sure. So when I started, cannabis was a movement, and now it's become an industry here in California. And Fresno, in particular, has a lot of legacy operators, that started this movement. And so now moving into this legal industry, there's a lot of people that would like to get in, but just don't know how. And as an operator, as a retail operator, going through the social equity program, that's so important to me because I was given a chance. And, I think I have an opportunity to, hire these folks and bring them into the market. A lot of these operators have already built huge brands, huge followings. Although they don't have a license to market their product, they still are fighting to make a living, to create, a brand. And I think that we can bring those folks on. We can, use what we know about, white labeling possibly their products, and getting them into industry that way, and showing them how this works. And to Gary's point, I mean, that's a wonderful thing that he's doing for people, putting them through, starting them out as working in a dispensary, but then you have a career path to do even more, and eventually run your own store, manage your own store. So, all those things are great. And as a social equity operator, we are already limited on resources, but that's not an excuse. There's a lot of ways that we can help our community be creative. So I think that that's one way that I would like to bring those kind of people into the fold. As soon as I get my opportunity to start hiring, that's the path that we're going to create. So
I appreciate that. And, again, so this really brings, again, we're seeing a common thread. We're talking about hiring practices, and we're also talking about legacy. We're talking about how do we bring the legacy folks in. So when we're talking about community benefit, we can't have the conversation about community benefit if we don't talk about, social equity, folks that are disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs, legacy, as well as hiring practices, right? One of the things that came out in a conversation too, and I think this was Gary that talked about this in how you constructed things, right? Is you haven't just put together a community benefit agreement that is about hiring and providing, although that's awesome and that's great to have these career paths, right? That's the whole point in a lot of these things. But there also needs to be a pathway to ownership. And so you talked about some of the things that you've done at Nature's Care that are above and beyond just simply hiring, like some of the programming you've put into place and some of the that you've instituted. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So we put together a little program, and it's called EFCB. It was the acronym, and what it stands for basically is expungement, which is typically the first thing that someone may have to run into, get their record clean. Because believe it or not, actually working in a dispensary, they do a thorough background check on you. Even though they're talking about social equity, it seems kind of awkward that they'd be doing all of that. But anyway, we put expungement in there. That's the E. Financial and credit awareness was the F, right? So once you have a good paying job, what do you do with your money now, right? How do you make sure you're doing well for your family? And my background is from consumer finance, so that's why that was important to me. The third thing is we talked about already was career in cannabis, right? How do you start from the entry point and get to running a store or running a region or a vice president, et cetera, right? So how do you put that path in place so people can kind of see, touch, and feel? And the last one near and dear to my heart is business creation, right? What are the opportunities there? So we've done a really good job with the expungement. We've done a good job with the financial literacy. We've done a good job with the careers in cannabis. We're on the B side now, right? The business creation. And what we're trying to do there is, again, I think we've done some work because we've got a lot of the folks who've got smaller companies who didn't have access to these markets now can come through us and put their product sets in there, right? So, or we can direct them towards a cultivator potentially to help white label or bring a product to life. Those are the things that, in my mind, will be true drivers in developing the whole community, right? So now you're going in and you're changing the economics of a community that's been disproportionately impacted severely, right? So that, to me, is the aha moment. And we're doing a pretty good job of getting there. I think, Doug, and I will let you chime in and kind of give your perspective, but anyone on this call right now who's looking to do this, that's the roadmap, right? And I think the thing that's first and foremost is an organization like the CEIC who's going to get you in the community and let them hear your voice, let you listen so that you can do the things that are necessary to help.
Awesome. No, I appreciate that, Gary. And the thing that stands out to me there is, again, we're looking at a holistic perspective, right? It can't just be one thing. And we're also seeing the same thread. I mean, Ace is over there in California thinking about how do we get legacy operators in? Maybe there's white labeling that can be done, something along these lines. And you're there in Chicago, totally different marketplace, totally different. I mean, very, very different marketplace, how they've been stood up. And you're actually looking at the same type of things. And so this is a common thread that we're seeing. And I think that anybody in this audience, we just did the poll and a lot of folks said that, here to learn what community benefit agreements are, right? This is what community benefit agreements are. It's looking at the problem as a whole and seeing that honestly, it's the same thing happening in many places. We're seeing legacy folks getting shut out, social equity folks getting shut out. We're seeing these opportunities come up, people getting stopped because they can't get hired even at a dispensary because they had a cannabis misdemeanor. So you need the expungement clinic, right? So all these different little pieces that all come together to form a holistic, solution that honestly, I think could be applied in just about any state. So I know we had some folks in Texas, some folks in Alabama. These are states that are coming online. And you're going to have to figure out how to navigate these things, and hopefully you can lean into these kinds of resources, Gary and Doug here. One thing that I think is really important here that we haven't touched on yet, that I know came up earlier, was how do you talk to the regulators and the municipalities? Because they want a piece of making sure that community benefit is done properly, because that's honestly what a big part of their job is, right? Like whether they get reelected or not has to do with whether they're affecting and impacting the community. So Doug, you guys are a lot of times that bridge between the community and the businesses. What has that experience been like? And do you have any tips for how to make that a little bit better process?
So I think like advocacy groups like ours have to be a part of the process. We're failing on the legislative side is because we're not bringing everybody to the table in the beginning. And that's where we are missing a lot of steps because they don't understand. They're relying on the industry to tell them how to do things. And we know they're business people through and through. They're going to always do what's best for their business. The whole reason this all started was to help those mostly impacted by the war on drugs, and that we're failing at this point. Those same individuals are still locked up and still locked out of this industry. So that's what our organization is all about. So when we started this process, we was like, so how can we make a change? And we knew we had to get on into the policy side of things, being able to go in and change bills and rewrite bills and to do these fixes. So we got there 2 years ago, then the pandemic happened, so we couldn't go to Springfield, so we didn't get the opportunity to really see how it operates. Last year, we got a chance to go to Springfield a lot. So then we decided like, okay, well, we got to get our 501c4. We got to be able to put ourselves in the position to really be able to say the things that we need to say and do the things that we need to do. So now we have our 501c4. So this whole thing is a step in the process, but we still can't forget about the whole reason why this was all brought up again there has been a lot of human rights violated in this process of the war on drugs. And I think if we start to address that, we'll also start to address a lot of these other things and give people another way to think about what's really going on. And that's who we are. That's what we're going to do. We're going to continue to do. We're going to put ourselves in the right place at the right time and work for the people who was mostly impacted by the war on drugs. That's why we do our sponsoring events, because that's the first step to getting these individuals even a foot in the door. Then we educate the community on what their rights are, so they don't continue to get victimized by it. And then we have a huge policy side of it as well.
I love that. What I'm hearing here is you're basically talking about you guys being a bridge between companies like Gary's and the community, because two things, and I know this from experience at the NCIA, navigating how I navigate here is I always tell people, speak up, because the more voices I hear saying that we need this or we need that, makes it a lot easier for me to then go advocate for that, whether it's with businesses or whether it's with the organization itself or whatever else it may be. And so I think that's what you're really talking about here, is that it's like a hack. So for businesses out there that are looking to do good, what I'm hearing here is get in touch with your local organizations so that you can have those boots on the ground the same way you can have an organization behind you as you're figuring this stuff out, so you're not figuring out in the vacuum. Gary did a lot of on the ground, going to these different group meetings and stuff, and that's how you were able to come up with a very similar 95% in alignment plan as CEIC. But that took a lot of time, hours, and work. And these are hacks, right? That's why we're here today, right? To kind of bring up these hacks for folks. If you're looking to get that edge in business and you're also caring about doing good, connect with these community organizations, and at the same time recognize that this is about doing good business. This is about actually creating better bottom lines. So I kind of want to come back to something on that. This is really for anybody here. Shannon, Ace, Gary, Doug, whoever feels compelled to answer this question is, if you are, say I'm a retailer or a manufacturer or wherever it may be, right? Because this doesn't have to be for retail business. This can be for any kind of business. What would be the thing you would tell me as far as where to get started with this, right? Because this sounds like a lot. It sounds like a lot to go through all these applications. It sounds like a lot to go to all these kinds of meetings. Like where can I get started if I'm a business trying to figure this out?
I'll jump in. I'll start first, if you guys don't mind. Mike, you hit the nail on the head, and I think it's really important that we reiterate what you just said. The reason success happened is that Doug assisted in the community with me. And then that led to, who do we need to talk to, Doug? So basically, he went through his network of folks, aldermen, whoever was involved that we need to get a hold of, try to help support what we're trying to do for the community. That is the fastest way for anyone who's listening right now to get this done, in my mind.
That's beautiful. And I see Shannon.
Yeah, I mean, Washington is really behind the ball, especially in comparison to Illinois. But I think, I don't remember which one of you said it, but if there are companies looking to do good, one of the things I see happening here in the private sector, so it's not in policy work, but the groups that are looking to support their communities are looking to us, and they're partnering with us. So they're creating allies, and they're creating events that are around the ally relationship that can produce, similar outcomes. Ownership in our state is difficult because our state only allows Washington state residents to own their licenses. Therefore, we as businesses can't even offer any form of participation to our employee pool because we can't offer it to a non-citizen. So there are a lot of challenges in this state. We're looking also for trying to create funding models and opportunities within that, as well as incubator type models where we're trying to provide support where we can, mostly in other states, to help facilitate dialogue around what does it mean to get into retail. I mean, Ace and I had a conversation recently just about staffing models and how do you work with these issues and how do you work with those. And one of the things that I think Washington has is a handful of years ahead of us, and we also have opportunity to progress outside of our own state at some point, but we have experience to share. And I think sometimes those two things really produce good outcomes and better bottom lines. I'm just here to say, better bottom lines definitely occur if you have diversity. It's proven over and over again. There's a handful of business indexes out there that demonstrate diversity actually produces better performance every time. So it may take a little longer in the beginning, but that's what good companies do. So I think allyship is important, identifying what those avenues can be and making sure those bridges are easier to cross. I think that's the things that we do.
I love that. Yeah, allyship. I mean, that's what we're here doing right now. We have all these folks here together, and this is why we brought this conversation together. This conversation isn't just so we can do, a nice little fancy webinar, throw it on the website. This is because we're trying to catalyze a whole conversation. So anybody listening to this, whether it's live or whether it's the recording, because we will be sending this recording out to several folks as well, make sure plug in. Whether it's with us as at the NCIA, whether it's with Doug and Gary, Shannon, and Ace here, make sure you plug in with other folks that are doing the same work, because to your point here is, you can't do it all, right? Especially when it comes to this kind of stuff. One thing I wanted to point out here, though, also, going on a little bit, Shannon, that you said, I think is really important here. I mentioned at the beginning the B Corps, right? Benefit corporations like Patagonia and Ben and Jerry's and these companies that, everybody kind of knows at this point in time, right? We're producing stat after stat that shows that especially the millennial generation is very interested in working at and supporting and patronizing companies that have some kind of social mission. CSR, corporate social responsibility, is definitely a thing within the corporate world. And in cannabis, it's taking a little while to kind of figure out how to get it in here. But it's so much, I think it's more important in cannabis than anywhere else because it is so fresh, so new. And it also, the roots of the industry itself comes from the drug war, which is, without the war on drugs, we don't have a lot of the problems that we're talking about in the first place, right? So I think it's really that much more important in our industry. Something that I wanted to bring up here, shifting gears just slightly, and then I wanted to ask Doug something, so I'm making a bookmark in my own head about that. But Ace, you've had to deal with kind of how to navigate, how do you get your community benefits agreement that's something that's robust and impactful together, and at the same time you're dealing with a regulatory structure that really is asking you to contribute a lot towards solving the problem financially. And as a small business, I know that's a challenge to navigate. But can you tell us a little bit about that and kind of what your thoughts are, and because this might be something that other folks are also dealing with too.
Sure. In the application process, part of the application was scored on your community benefits section. You know, what are your plans for the community? And they also have, you know, set up a fund where they're asking for you know, operators in all the industries, not retail, but anybody that gets a cannabis license in our city would be obligated to contribute money to, in addition to giving back to the community. So it just seemed kind of like, whoa, this is going to be tough because, you know, we're limited on resources. I'm already asking for the city to help me with, you know, the fees that it takes to actually apply, and then they want me to commit to, you know, what I'm going to do when I get my license, you know. So we tried to, and we want to engage the community, of course. You know, I mean, even though this process, I got my license approved in 2021. And, you know, we're still not actually operational, but during that time, how do we engage with the community and show the city that, you know, we're working on it, you know, we're committed. So we had to get creative. I think just, we found that there's other organizations in our town that already have initiatives to help the homeless, to clean up Fresno, you know. So recently, one of the events that our mayor has started is something called Beautify Fresno, you know. So I decided to use our team to come out and you know, it's cleanup, but it takes 2 hours on a Saturday. But then also we did some pop-up events and other things that were going on in Fresno, and we started collecting names of people that are that are supportive of what we're trying to do, that are looking for job opportunities in the future when we do open. And I compiled that list, and we began to send that out to people to let them know, hey, you know, we're going to be at this event. If you're interested in supporting Banyan Tree and you want to be, you know, part of what we're doing, come on out and help, you know. So those are the kind of things where, I mean, we kind of got to get creative on how we engage the community, but it shows that, you know, our city, that, hey, even though we're not actually operational yet, we're still out here, you know, and trying to do good things for the community. And so
Absolutely. No, and what I love about this, again, we're talking about getting out in the community. Again, it's the basics, right? And I'm just going to keep hammering this in because a lot of times we don't know where to start. You figured out what's already going on. People are already doing this work, right? In Gary's case, Doug and Peter were already doing this work specifically, right? So who is doing the work? Who am I aligned with in the first place, right? Let's get connected with these folks. Let's work together, right? The other thing that you're talking about doing here is, again, not just individuals, but organizations, other organizations, chambers of commerce. I think you had something to do recently with the Chamber of Commerce. You know, different groups and organizations that are already working on these problems. Connect with them, right? So that all said, I know that, again, this is one of these topics that kind of seems big, but we can simplify it down, connect with the community, engage in better hiring practices, look at things in a holistic manner where it's, you know, it's about financial literacy and creating pathways to ownership, right? These are all kind of the pieces we're talking about. But Doug, you guys at the CIC actually have a toolkit, if I'm not mistaken, for how companies can actually get rolling. And we had a question that I'm going to get to in a minute here in the Q&A. This is, I think, a great segue into. So can you tell us a little about the toolkit and, you know, where you're at with that?
So as we were going through this process, once again, it went back to the members. It was like, well, maybe we need to create some kind of toolkit for other organizations to follow based off the things that we went through. It's completed now, so anybody who want to, you know, check out our toolkit and collaborate and partner with us, we're open. That's what it was created for. So people don't have to waste a lot of time trying to learn the process. Too many times we try to reinvent the wheel when we really don't have to. So our organization has already created a toolkit, step by step, on how to talk about and negotiate it. But we got to understand that each community is different. So each community needs are different. What's needed over in River North here in Illinois, it's not the same as what's needed in Inglewood. So um, that's where you become more valuable at. You partner with those communities and find out what they need. It might be just tablets for the elementary school or something like that. Then you partner with Microsoft and have them bring in the tablets. It's all about partnership. Everything we do, we set a large table. We collaborate with a lot of different individuals to make this happen. Gary come to me, and if I don't have it, I go to one of our partners, and this we continue to work this process over and over and over. You got to build out a large enough table that anything comes out up, you know, it's somebody we can turn to. I don't know all the answers. We don't know all the answers, but working with about 15 different organizations, we get these answers. We put our minds together and we come up with these solutions. And if the government, our legislators took the same process, they can say they suffer a lot of headaches because they haven't been in the streets. They haven't been in the neighborhoods, and they don't understand the cannabis fight. And that's how they're making so many mistakes. And the federal government is on the pathway to do the same thing. It's enough subject matter experts out here now that need to be at that table helping them do this. Until we get to that point, it's going to continue to be mistakes made state by state. They need to start reaching out to some of these other states and just putting their heads together to work through this. We got to get it right in the beginning, not the end.
Absolutely. And then when we don't get it right in the beginning, we need to continue to collaborate and partner and be at the bigger tables and keep pushing each other forward. And that's why I love this conversation. And I know we're starting to wind down closer to the hour. We could probably talk about this for 2 hours. Like I said, this is just the catalyst of what's hopefully going to be a long-term conversation. Really, anybody that's watching this that is intrigued and interested in really how do we make an impact? This is how we make an impact, because it's not just, okay, we can come up and draft like 10 ideas, but these aren't just ideas. These are implementations and strategies that have worked and that are creating a better bottom line. So that if you're a business trying to compete in cannabis, which is highly competitive, right? I don't even care, even if you're in one of the states where it's a limited license situation, like in Illinois, it's still highly competitive, right? Because even though it may be, you're only competing against 12 others, those 12 others have a lot of resources a lot of the time, and you have to fight with each other and figure it out. And there's no special sauce here yet in cannabis, right? So no matter what state you're in, no matter what part of the industry it is, community benefit, I think, is where to really start. And I think it's literally slept on a lot of the time. We have a couple questions here. One of them has to do here with, so from Monica Medina McCurdy, thanks for the discussion. Very helpful info in the process and outcomes as far as sound really promising. I'm in Pennsylvania, where adult use is not yet legal, though we hope a social equity bill will be introduced this year. Are there provisions in the CBA that are specific to agricultural stakeholders or the farming community? And so I kind of want to just, throw this back to Doug here, actually, because I think this speaks to what you just said, if I'm not mistaken, is that the toolkit that you have that's kind of how to start a CBA can be used really by anybody, regardless of what community, what industry you're in. And then kind of go from there. And that's also where reach out to CEIC, NCIA, whoever it may be, to help you figure out how to navigate some of these dots. Does that sound about right to you, Doug?
Absolutely, because that CBA is going to be different from a dispensary CBA. So the thing that you need to do is figure out, what do you guys need? What do you guys need on the agriculture side? And then you make their demands that way. You know what I mean? So it can be tax breaks or breaks on the soil, just anything that you need that's going to help promote, healthy growing space for your cannabis.
Awesome. Yeah,
and then
follow
you
the
just
same.
give it to the community. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Follow the same steps, right?
Yep.
Get in the community, ask the questions, find organizations that you can work with, make sure your hiring practices work, come up with a holistic game plan, and really think about the impact and how it's going to go. And then lean into resources like everybody here that's doing this work already to be able to figure out, how do I continue to navigate this? The last question, which is going to lead us into our closing thoughts here today, is from Donna Murray in Chicago. Great to have you on here, Donna. I've loved interacting with you every time we've gotten to interact. really a wonderful, wonderful person, human being here in the industry. So Donna, as you have reflected on equity and community agreements, what have you discovered at this point must be an intrinsic part of both? So I think this is a great lead into our closing thoughts. What are your closing thoughts here, and what really do you think must be an intrinsic part of these things, right? The community benefits, and equity, and so on and so forth. So we'll start with whoever wants to kind of wrap up here and go with your closing thoughts. Yeah, we'll take it away. So who wants to go first?
I'll go first, especially in Pennsylvania, as you guys are still trying to build out, right? Get your policy together. This is the most active you guys need to be in your legislators' face, and letting them know exactly what you need. Get a seat at that table. By force, if you have to. Just asking one time is not going to do it. You got to be at the Capitol building, in your lawmaker's face, who's writing these bills, because quite frankly, most of them didn't partake in the cannabis industry before this. They really don't understand the culture and things of that nature. You guys got to educate them, because they don't know. You don't know what you don't know. And at this point, you guys got to be the voice to get them to where they need to be. Because if you don't, you're gonna have a lot of the same issues we have in here with litigation and stuff like that, just because of missteps along this process.
No, and I'm just gonna piggyback off this real quick. I'm gonna say, and a lot of times in new states, you don't know who to reach out to. NCIA here can be a great resource for you. So please reach out to us here, and we can plug you in with folks in other states that have already done this work. So just want to throw that commentary in there. And then the other piece, actually, no, that was it. So, so who wants to go next? I see Shannon.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think Doug said it best, that you kind of have to start in the beginning. This state did not do that in the beginning. We're 10 years in, and Donna, I think you commented in here that you were glad of my transparency there. But I think we can also learn along the maturity curve for every state. If you don't start there, how do you get there? And I would open the dialogue to, not only the participants here, but anyone that listens to this, how to, build those bridges and create change and define really clearly, whether it's through it's a formal community benefit or otherwise, make those your corporate values and make those your corporate mandates, and they will pay you back. And I think this industry has proven over and over again that innovation is here. The individuals from the legacy market, have defined a lot of that. And how do we move that all the way through, and also connect that with the capital? And although it was in a separate conversation, Doug said it, if you end up starting to have those conversations too late, it becomes a fight. So let's stop fighting, and let's kind of agree to disagree that they're on some of those paths forward. Let's find the common ground, and let's not stop the progress, because progress is what we need. And I think we in Washington can learn from the other states that are getting it a little better and a little right. And these community benefit agreements have the stats that matter, whether they're mandated or not. We should figure out how to implement those and create our partnerships more nationally than just focused locally, and stop fighting and catalyze conversation, have the tough ones. They're tough conversations to have, but you got to have them in order to move forward. And I encourage that. And anyone that can help us in Washington, we're open ears, and I'm happy to have anyone call me and talk to me about it as well.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that, Shannon. I know firsthand that you absolutely mean that, because I've seen you do it. And so I really appreciate that, your openness to have conversations and figure out how to help support other people and continue on this journey. So appreciate you. I did just realize I had a question in the chat here about the LGBTQ people of color. What about these folks? And I do want to say, look, this is for all communities, right? Everything we're doing here, when we're talking about community benefit, any community that you're a part of, that you're intersecting with, that you're serving, this is true for any community, right? So, this isn't about, to Shannon's point, finding how to segment ourselves off. It's about, we serve different communities, but we all have a lot of similar problems that we need to figure out in this cannabis space. And so let's work together. So I appreciate the question, and just want to bring some attention to that. So I see Ace, let's get your closing thoughts, and then we'll go to Gary.
Sure. What I found during, trying to link up with the other organizations, that cannabis is more accepted. Cannabis businesses are accepted and respected with other business owners and organizations more than ever. So don't be afraid to reach out to these organizations in your community. Start there first, and then grow bigger. But I found that they're all willing to accept our help. So that
Awesome.
has made it easy.
Great reminder. And it's more than before. Even if you're in a place that's still not fully accepted, it's still probably a lot more so than it was before. So great point there. And Gary, what do you got for us?
Sure. So my colleagues have done an excellent job of wrapping this up, so I won't be very long-winded. Partnership, I think, is the word of the day, in community. I think those two things, if you do those two things and you listen, I think you can solve a lot of problems, because if I look back at all the stuff that we've done, Doug, it's been through partnership, it's been through listening, and then we just went and did work, benefits agreement or not. So I think that if there's one takeaway I could give folks, that's kind of what I would call the secret sauce for us that got it all done, and don't give up, and unfortunately, sometimes we come back to the community with news that's not the news they want to hear, right? But, if it's making progress, they will listen. I will say that.
Absolutely. I appreciate this. And, again, we're not just talking about concepts here. We're talking about things that have been implemented, that have created impact in business, that have led to promotions, that have led to better business, better bottom line. So, like if you're listening to this, and whether you're a business owner, whether you're supporting other businesses, ancillary businesses, it's a community, it's an ecosystem we have to create here. And really, really looking forward to seeing what comes next. I know that you guys have crushed your goals, and I know that you guys are now, like you said, building on other things. And Shannon and Ace here, excuse me, sorry about that. Shannon and Ace here, I know that you all are collaborating with our retail committee and seeing how can we continue to bring this conversation further along as well to other folks in the industry around the country. So with that said, I want to thank our panelists here today for all the work you're doing in the industry, not just for taking your time today, which I really appreciate also, but all the time it took to prepare this and all the work you're doing in the industry to really create a more equitable industry and create better community benefit. So thank you so much. And then Brian, Brooke, thank you so much for everything you guys do on the back end. I want to make sure I throw this shout out to you guys, because without you guys doing all that work and hustle on the back end, we wouldn't have a platform to begin with. So really appreciate you all. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and shut my mouth and say thank you, everybody, for joining us, and really appreciate everybody. As always, I'm full of gratitude. So thank you, and everybody have a great one.
Thank you.
Wait, sorry. We're supposed to go back to Brian. I'm going back to Brian here.
Oh no, you're totally fine. That's the official end of the program as far as I'm concerned. Thank you so much, Mike, for using this platform to really showcase and bring together such diverse and amazing perspectives. I think this was a fantastic session to start the year off with, and sort of piggyback on all the amazing work that all of these amazing panelists have done over the last calendar year in particular, while also looking ahead to what can be done moving forward this year as well. So huge thanks to you, Doug, Ace, Gary, and Shannon, for your contributions to the program, and humongous thanks to you, Mike, for spearheading this conversation over the last 2 months or so. I think that you came up with these ideas for these first Catalyst conversations right when we concluded the calendar year last year. So really excited to continue showcasing these amazing conversations actually tomorrow. Like I mentioned at the top of the hour, we do have another Catalyst conversation being hosted in this month in honor of Black History Month, and also to sort of piggyback on one of our recurring programs that has been part of the Catalyst Conversation series since its inception in 2021. We've started off the year with these amazing programs that sort of showcase some business opportunities that are specifically available in in new and emerging markets, as well as with groups that you saw here today on how you can collaborate and really take your business to the next level moving into 2023. So if you haven't yet, make sure to follow the link that I'll post in the chat room shortly to sign up for that session as well, and join us for another amazing program tomorrow afternoon. I'll actually be broadcasting that event from our the event venue for our Missouri Industry Social. So if you are in the Midwest region, or you might know any comrades, colleagues, or coworkers amongst your network that might be interested in connecting with our Midwest regional network tomorrow evening for our Missouri Industry Social networking event, please head to NCIA's website to learn more details and secure your ticket before they go up tonight at midnight. And then last but not least, all of our networking and educational events that are taking place in this spring are sort of leading up to and into our 11th annual Cannabis Industry Lobby Days. And I did want to take this opportunity. I know Mike's been promoting it far and wide on social over the last few weeks, but in conjunction with Black History Month this month as well, we are offering a special package on any sponsorships that are secured surrounding our 11th annual Cannabis Industry Lobby Days. Any sponsorships secured in the month of February will have 100% of proceeds donated towards our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Scholarship Fund, which will directly impact our ability to have a diverse perspective on Capitol Hill during our in-person lobby days. Last year, we were able to send, I think, just over a dozen member business owners from across our network nationwide to join our expansive team that you can see here in DC. And this year, we're wanting to double or triple that. So please do reach out to Mike following today's program to learn more about how you can support his work surrounding our upcoming lobby days and really maximize our impact in DC by securing a sponsorship package in the next 9 days. All right. And then last but not least, just a huge thank you once again for joining us for another NCIA Industry Essentials educational webinar and the first live broadcast of 2023. We're going to close out today's program, as always, with this end of event member appreciation credit sequence, highlighting the nearly 75 member businesses that make up our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Scholarship Network that are going to be joining us in Washington, D.C. this year. So if you are one of the people that responded that you are not currently an NCIA member, at the top of the program, please do follow up with Mike following today's program to learn more about how you can get complimentary annual membership for free for 1 calendar year to really start your journey with the NCIA network and to really capitalize on all the amazing membership benefits that come along with membership with the association. So with that, we'll leave you with this credit sequence. All of our panelists will leave the stage as we're doing that. Stick around for the next few moments. And if you don't see your company listed here, that just means you need to head to our website to learn more about joining the association today. And we look forward to seeing you at one of our upcoming in-person events. And of course, at our 11th annual Cannabis Industry Lobby Days this May. Thank you all so much. We'll see you again next time.